Okay, the Germans open things up, and I'm going to pull back a little bit. See if I can get a whole year in on a video. It's 4 turns instead of the 2. I think I can. Inspired Leadership. This is going to give 3 different counters, which go in different armies, and you re-roll all combat dice once if you lost, and re-rolling could change the outcome to a win, which it usually can. If the dice are not re-rolled, you get to keep the marker in play. Or if the re-roll wins the combat by a +3 differential, you get to keep it. So it doesn't go away, which could be very useful. And this will last, beyond 15. So that's kind of cool. But I think the card doesn't go back in the deck, though, as far as I know. Certainly could have made good ground against the Russians. However, I'm not sure how valuable that is. There's a lot of Russia. I got to get all the way back here to force them to surrender. I don't think that's going to happen. Usually I like to concentrate on the Russians, but the situation right now is such that I feel like the war can still be won in the West. That's a feeling I don't usually get in World War I games by 1915. Usually, to me, it's obvious, okay, it's time to concentrate on Russia. Concentrate on that more attritional faction. Whatever. Aspect of the game. Here, I don't feel like the attrition has yet set in quite the same way. It looks like I have a capacity to break through at Verdun, so I've moved everything there, including the commanders. If I can get Verdun, I can actually push into Paris. So it is actually possible for me to get to Paris. And then if I do that, the Allies have to take Paris, and I can devote all my resources to defending Paris. So it's an intriguing possibility. I'm a little confused about it. It says re-roll all combat dice. Well, is that just my combat dice? If I have more than one, that would make sense for all. Or, playing solo, I'm like, I grab a hand. That's how I read it immediately. But it says all. And playing solo, hey, I'm rolling dice against different people. And it could very well mean either way. Let me see how the attack procedure is worded. So the attacker rolls a die, the defender rolls a die. I'm going to have to look this one up. Now, I don't see how you could have and re-rolling could change the outcome. I mean, why did you attack if there was no chance of victory? And how is that even possible? Because you have 6-sided dice. You're not going to have that many modifiers. So I have to figure it's only the attacker who gets to re-roll his dice, or the defender. Whoever is doing this, but I'm not sure. I found the errata online, and no, it's not covered in it. What is covered is that the Allied version of this card needs a little modification up here, but it reminded me that, and I don't know if this is readable at all. It looks horrible on mine, but wow, I don't know if these cards are readable. I don't know what's wrong with my camera, actually. Everything looks terrible right now. Like the weird coloring that was coming off here is coming off everything, and I don't know if that's the case. I'm assuming you're getting this, but it might just be, Jesus. Anyway, if this is visible, there should be asterisks around this if it was replayable. It's not. Inspired German Leadership is apparently a one-time card, but the Allied Inspired Leadership card is multi-time. And I gotta take a look and see if my videos are at all visible anymore. I guess it's just the video quality of what I'm seeing, which is fine. At some point it might get too bad and I have to switch to the yellow camera, but the video quality that you're seeing seems to be okay. Anyway, if this was a carefully written game where I felt like everything was kind of ironclad, I would have no problem and say that it's all the dice. Well, it would be troublesome no matter what, because if it just said all the dice and it didn't have the and re-rolling could change the outcome to a win. Then if it didn't have that contradictory statement in there, and I think it is, then whatever it said I would do, right? And the problem is enough of the rest of the game isn't necessarily what I'd expect that I don't know. I don't know if it's just the Germans re-rolling, which was as I first thought of it. But it's the only way to make that second sentence not completely contradictory, is to re-roll just the German dice, or just the attacker's dice. Well, just the German dice. So that's what I'm going to go with. It's not covered in the errata, and at least not the version that I saw, which is 2016 or whatever. But I don't know. There may be a living rules or something somewhere, but this is the only errata that came up, and only one thing came up both times, which was the Allied card getting a plus, because it's an asterisk card, and it wouldn't make sense without the plus. It would have to be playable at any point. Okay. So that's how I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it as only the German die is re-rolled. And if they have multiple dice, they get to re-roll all their dice. But that should be stated here. It shouldn't say re-roll all combat dice. Jesus, you know. But there's this rule, dice are not re-rolled. I mean, it's clearly possible for the dice not to be re-rolled. And I cannot think of a situation where you're losing a battle and you would not, I mean, you wouldn't re-roll them if you win the battle, so you wouldn't lose it there. Jesus, I just don't fucking know. I really don't. All right. Anyway, I'm going to do it as just the German dice, and that'll be how I do it for all the countries. And I'm not sure if that's correct or not, but I couldn't find anything in the errata. So Verdun fell. The French did the "they shall not pass" successfully once. They failed the second time, got pushed out, but the Germans didn't have enough gas left to get them to Paris, which helps a little bit. And the game's not in threat of being over yet. And the Germans, instead of being in the Somme, are now in Verdun in Belgium as the line, which is, you know, equally interesting, basically. The Allies are going to have to reposition their forces, like Verdun being potentially a giveaway. The Somme is also potentially a giveaway. I got to make sure I don't lose Paris is the big deal. Now, the Germans are the first to be able to build trenches, and I'm going to be able to entrench, double entrench, because they're the Germans all over the place. Is that more valuable than building up armies? Well, I got to build up some armies too. There's no question about that. But I have a decent number of points to build up my defenses. I had 2 cases where their inspired leaders were not used, so I rebuilt those units. Basically, I've got 2 units in a trench everywhere. I doubled up on trenches here. This trench is stuck back here. I will not get this back. I'm just kind of screwed out of it. Again, I'm kind of disturbed by that. There's a number of things I'm disturbed by. I'm disturbed by the fact that this card is not a rebuildable one. It doesn't have the asterisks. So it's gone. I'm hoping that there's more German-inspired leadership, because there certainly was German-inspired leadership at other times. Is the Straßtruppen marker what's supposed to cover that? Maybe. Maybe that's what's going to cover it for the later advances that you have. But the Germans certainly had pretty damn impressive leadership at certain times, coming up in the East especially. Anyway. Partway through production, I haven't drawn my tech card yet. Otherwise, I'm done. So let's see what we get. Jagstaffel's farmed. Well, this is P3. We don't have P1, so that's going to get reshuffled. Hard to decide which was better, trenches or non-trenches, building up the units. The units would be certainly more valuable on offense. Trenches are kind of iffy there. And also leaving a clog of trenches is perhaps a questionable idea. However, in defense, I think the trenches have a slight edge, and I really don't want to break anywhere. So putting these second trenches in place, I certainly want one. The second trenches are kind of important for the same reason one is. The Allies attack, they don't get the big push modifier. They have to break another trench line to go through. So the defense in depth does make sense. The Western Allied version of the inspired leadership is different. They only get one counter instead of the 3. So there's a significant change. That's why it gets reshuffled back in. They get a couple of counters available to them. Other problem is, now I have a serious threat. I probably can't break Verdun. My armies are fatigued. I hadn't managed to build up. The French did a lot of damage, I guess. I don't know why they're so damaged. I'm having real trouble figuring that out, and this is not a good moment because there's noise coming from downstairs, so I'll be back. These values are correct. I can't tell you why they're correct, but I think they are. First of all, the French in Verdun, I did attacks with them. The French don't have a lot of points available to them. They only have 4, and I think I was finding myself having a hard time building up the Somme region. Anyway, I'm in no position to make an attack at this point. What I'm going to try to do is pull forces to defend in Paris. Remember, I only get 2 shifts total with the Western Allies, so this is going to be a little rough. Let me go back and try to remember my fucking guerrilla warfare, which I will always forget. It was a hit this time, so I would have done that. Now, I knew there was a special rule regarding British in Paris space or non-French in Paris space. France is the only, and I had to spend some time looking that fucker up. France is the only person who can do the none shall pass. But as long as you have some French armies defending there, I think we're okay. Okay, so the Allies advanced into Baghdad. They rebuilt the army there. They rebuilt this army. They built trenches and did what defense they could. This card goes into the next year's deck, so I'm putting it over there as kind of a discard that's available. We get our technology check. We did not get to use our poison gas, so we throw that away and back into the tech deck after this card is resolved. But I just could not see making an attack with the Western Allies. And it's tanks, A3. Well, that also will not get picked up yet. We haven't gotten any artillery yet. It starts off, I don't remember who the minister was. This is handled a little more simply, of course, than Le Grand Guerre. It starts off with this Central War Industries. They'll get a bonus on their first attack, so I want to make an attack. Oh no, wait, DRM -1. Oh, we don't want to attack. And there's no requirement that we have to make an attack. And the EA production, Petrograd's production, is increased from 1 to 2 for the rest of the game. This is more complex. The Le Grand Guerre one is more complex because it actually sets up some difficulties in terms of the national will, where there's some problems because of that leader, and then he can actually get sacked due to Rasputin. So, I mean, you know, there's levels to which, and if he's sacked, then the production goes back down. So that's not going to affect our decisions much, except we probably are not going to make an attack because making one at -1 doesn't make a lot of sense, even though it would be very helpful to start pushing on the Germans at this point, because Paris is in danger here. The only reason it's not in that much danger is the Germans didn't get to build their army, so that offensive has stopped, speaking in terms of grand offensives. suit up. Germany's back a point, actually. And I don't know where I would have taken that from, because they lost Prussia. Anyway, let me figure that out later. But I recharged the Caucasus Army. I think it's important to block that entry. I built a trench here and built up some of the damaged units for the Russians. Can't do anything about the Serbs, but I do have to figure out who's not getting a point here. And I have the feeling that it's this trench that didn't get built. Because I really didn't want to lose Belgium. There was a possibility the Allies could thrust there. There was just no chance that they were going to push into here. A good turn to be attacking Serbia, it turns out. The M+1 for defending Serbian armies. This doesn't feel like it should be a Central Powers event, but it is. So that's going to change, my decision making. I'm probably going to try to thrust against Russia instead. I mean, facing a +2 DRM, that's just too much, I think. It needs a cheat sheet more than it has. I mean, yes, it has a number of different pieces of information here that are useful and necessary, but not sufficient. What else it needs? It needs a cheat sheet for the military. Does artillery add a die, or does it add a +1? Now, I know the answer to that, but I'm constantly thinking about that, and even though I know the answer, I still feel like I have to look it up. And we finish up the spring turn going into summer with the Turks basically just covering Mosul and rebuilding that unit. And oh god, this looks horrible on this screen. And I don't know, it's awful, it really is. I may have to switch to the yellow camera. The Austrians did a push into the Ukraine, which was successful, and you can see the Russians have taken some defense into the Pripyats. However, they have to leave Galicia open, or they have to leave troops in Galicia. Does it make sense to have 2 units? If I do a none shall pass, it does, and there's no real reason for that, so I'll do that. I moved my artillery forward here, which is rebuilt, with the intention of continuing to spearhead attacks against the Russians. I don't think I'm going to be able to make the punch into Paris. I'm not sure, but I don't think I'm going to, and I think at this point, the weakening of Russia looks like it's maybe a little too easy in this game. It's funny. In most of the World War I games that I've played, if you devote your effort to Russia, maybe a little heavier than historically, you can collapse Russia. And I think that may be the case here. The one game where it's not the case is La Grande Guerre, where you do want to grind them down and you're hoping to cause the revolution and everything through basically a combination of bad events and collapse rolls and all kind of stuff like that, because it really takes the national will into effect in a way that no other game really does. Other games have national will. It's like a track. You lose points. This is a track, but it generates rolls that shoot you up and down. It's just this really complex mechanism that's beautiful because you can't really predict it. But that's what you're hoping to do. You're hoping to smash the Russians that way. You don't end up gaining a lot of territory in Russia. You may actually have a hard time fighting the Russians because they have such a fucking huge army. It's crap, and you could get lots of national will for beating it up, but it just keeps showing up. Even though it gets stretched thin in that game. Everything does. At least the way I play. But anyway, this advance by the Austrians, well, that makes Romania a little bit harder to cope with. Remember, you can't sea supply without, only the British can do the sea supply, so the Russians aren't going to be able to do something with their Black Sea fleet here. For whatever that's worth. Romania will be a big problem if and when it comes in. But right now, we're opening up the south. We're maybe going to cause a collapse over here on that Russian front. But it's looking ugly. It's looking ugly for the Central Powers. It has been all game ever since I didn't make it into the Somme, to tell you the truth. And I didn't try. I didn't set myself up to. I set myself up with everybody here. All right. Into the next one. Look, the Central Powers situation is so dire that I actually have to continue making the stab for Paris. I could go into the French Alps, that would be interesting, and into southern France, but I don't have a lot of extra troops. So I pulled 2 units, one out of Belgium, one out of Poland, into Verdun, and I'm going to make the attack on Paris. It is possible I could win. I've got 4 fresh troops. The Allies have 4 fresh troops. No, it's not possible. Screw that, man. There's no reason to do it if I can't win. Alright, let me think again about how the map's built. There's a little line here, so I couldn't go into the French Alps anyway. I'm debating. It's either my card for the turn is the Gotha raids. Gotha raids because there are no Allied fighters. Therefore, I'm going to take a point off the Brits, which is much, much more effective than the Zeppelins, which just reduce the air defense as they chase those things down. I have these 2 inspired leaders. I can basically launch an attack in one of 2 places. From Belgium into the Somme, I don't know, it's hard to tell which is the higher risk. There's piles and piles of troops here, but they're not really effective. So there's 2 effective units there, and I'd have 4 units. I think it's the better advantage to go for. The other option would be to go into Prussia, which would help cover, but it wouldn't even shorten my line or anything. This doesn't either, but I think I do want to push forward. The only problem is I don't have a lot of trenches left to rebuild in the Somme, to build my defenses. But then I'm really putting the squeeze on the Western Allies, and Paris is where the battle, is decided. It's where the war is decided. Yeah, taking Russia out, that's great. But that actually doesn't determine the game. Unlike in the Grand Guerre, where you can, and Balance of Power for that matter, you can have France fall, and the war will still continue, which kind of makes sense in some cases. But again, they want to generate World War I. This puts a greater emphasis on the West Front than most of the games do. Most of the games require that you knock out all of the powers. Well, if you don't have to beat the Russian bear, if you can win just by beating up on France, it may make more sense to focus on that. That may cause a historical shift the other direction. Most of the games, the focus is far too much on the East Front. In this, it may start being far too much on the West Front. To see the attritional effect of the game. The Central Powers, and I'm going to make some changes in my decisions based on this, made attacks coming out of Belgium. They failed completely. They didn't even break the trench. They knocked their 2 inspired leaders out. They got to re-roll twice. Never broke the Allied line at all. Okay, but the thing that I'm noticing is, I forgot the number I was at. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, I did 8 rebuilds, and now I'm out. I have nothing else I can spend on. So I'm going to launch an attack here for attritional purposes, and possibly here as well, just to try to wear down the Russians a little bit, who have less economic capability. So during your attack phase, you have to keep track of what your builds are going to be, because you might be wasting builds. I have 3 extra bucks that I have no use for. So I'm probably going to make 3 attacks. It out to almost nothing. I did 1 unit here. I failed in my push attack, and then here, actually I did break the trench. I do get 1 more attack coming in. I'm sorry, because you don't get hurt when you break the trench, but that failed. So I rebuild those 3 points, and now I'm all built up. I have everything built, basically, with the Germans. There's no more army I can build. I've lost a couple of units. They're gone forever, So that becomes a problem for them. And now we go to the Western Allies, who have some economic issues coming up. For one thing, I smacked the British Africans again, and I got the Gotha raids, and possibly U-boats too. Germans got an aerial reconnaissance. I forgot to draw the technology before I did that. They get an air superiority marker in any area with at least one land supplied. They'll roll 1 die in dogfights. The defender wins the first combat that results in a tie. Flip to flown side. So let's get us an aeroplane. And what's most important to us? Probably Belgium, and it's not all that well defended. So we'll put that there. So now I've got the Salonika card. And they intervened. Maybe not optimal, but I had to do the naval. I had a full army here. Now I've got a full army in Greece. Well, I have damaged ones down here. We tried an attack on Verdun. I don't know if it was a wise idea. It didn't turn out too badly. We hurt the Germans a little bit and busted through both their trenches to do that. But it wasn't enough to justify the risk involved, I don't think. We got away cheap on the U-boats, and the Germans are considering going to unrestrained because I looked at the chart and it looks pretty good to do, to tell you the truth, at least until the pact is set, the Sussex Pact. Which means I've been wasting, allowing the Allies too many points. Anything else we recovered here? We didn't launch an attack out of Baghdad because I don't have a lot of money. And I wanted to send a buck up to Serbia, which I did. Awesome. I can give them $1 every turn, and they only need a buck right now. And that means the Serbs can be kind of a danger to the Austrians, which might be kind of interesting. Eastern Allies, I made the decision for the Russians to attack into the Ukraine. I haven't rebuilt yet. My event card, U.S. entry track went up by 1 because there's a fresh U-boat available. I need to remember that. But yeah, I made the decision to attack the Ukraine. It didn't work, and then I did some rebuilding to help defend the lines. Some consideration about trying to attack the Germans or something for an attritional purpose, but it doesn't make sense. I have a lot of Russian armies to build, and I want to keep building up my defenses. I did make an advance into Kars, though, and the Serbs built up their army so that they're now more of a threat to the Austrians. We were kind of hoping to drop the hammer on Austria and make life a lot less pleasant for them. When the Italians come in, if they do, I'm assuming they will, that's going to get a lot uglier. Boy, this screen is ugly. What I can see, I'm really fingers crossed that that's not what you're going to be seeing, because it's like a heat map. And that pushes us to the Central Allies. One thing I wanted to talk about before I go on to that, I was thinking about how even a game like this, it's very light, very abstracted in a lot of ways, but because it uses that more traditional wargaming type, I go, you go type flavor, even though they're intermixed, and there's interesting stuff like these cards and everything going on, it allows me to see the game in a different light than, say, what I did recently with Falling Sky, Fort Sumter, even fucking Gloomhaven, where every decision is kind of like this little atomic thing, and then it's the next player's turn to make a decision. Cards are being played or flipped or whatever. Decisions and every single thing is so rich and so heavy and laden. Every decision, every little moment is so laden with import that there's never time to step back and watch what's going on. And this, there is. In Britannia, there is, in a huge game, an OCS, Le Grand Guerre, Der Weltkrieg, there's time to take a lot of actions, and you don't have to zoom in and every single little decision isn't filled with so much import that it actually blinds you to the strategic situation of the game. And here I'm making decisions more on a strategic level because I'm not being blinded by the everyday. Sort of every card play is so laden with value that, I have to argue that point out back and forth in my head. What is the optimal move at this moment? It's really not that, that would be like stopping to discuss the odds of every attack. I'm not sure that you can't abstract away from those decisions, that with enough play of, say, Falling Sky, I might get used to making those choices to such an extent that I can give you a narrative sweep. I doubt it because I keep switching hands on every decision. It's not like I'm focusing on one side at a time. So I don't think it's going to be ever easy. But even if it was, even if there's people who can do that, I can't do it, and I think the barrier is higher. And, that spoils something for me. A game like this, I can just kind of enjoy what's going on. I can enjoy watching it. It's a pleasure to play something that follows a more traditional pattern. I'm getting fucking sick of modern design ethics. But, you could say, fine, that's because you play solo. No. Playing opposed, I'm doing the same damn thing. I'm optimizing my turn on those games. On a game like this, I'm trying to meet my strategy during my turn, my brand strategy. And I also, if the game's big enough, might have time to relax and get away from the game for a few minutes and not be so stuck in that always having to plan my next turn or feeling guilty about it, because I'm not planning my next turn. But I want to be able to go out for a smoke. Give me 20 minutes while a turn goes by. Okay, that's too much to ask for something like this. But, it is nice to have some downtime between turns and everything. And again, that's all against what modern design is all about. Modern design is about trying to give you something like a real-time strategy computer game on a board. It really is trying to make it so that you're just getting battered from one place to the other mentally. And I don't know why that's appealing to people. If I want that, I'll play bridge, right? Setting factor here on the Central Powers is the Dardanelles forts reinforced. If Serbia has been conquered, you get the Dardanelles heavy artillery in Gallipoli. This sits around until then, and it gives counter battery 1 ability for this special thing that allows it to defend itself with 2 dice. But if it's defeated, it's actually eliminated. Well, that's interesting. So I took another shot at Serbia, and I took them. And I realized I could not have done a none shall pass up in Belgium, which I did, I think, because that's not a flag and it's not a production area, even though it's the capital of Belgium. Obviously, we can't replay that, but I'm pretty sure I did it there. Anyway, couldn't do it here. There's a Serbian army down in Greece now, and I think that's allowed, but I'm not positive. If there's not, they're in Albania. Hey, they're in Montenegro. I'll check that to make sure that they're allowed to be there. If they're not allowed to be in Greece, I may have to cover Bosnia to prevent the Albanian force from coming in easily. Because otherwise Albania has to be conquered. It would take 2 steps to go in. Not that the Serbs are going to have enough oomph to get in there. And there is some thought about invading Greece. So I'll have to look up the Greek rules to see how that works. Production-wise, I covered Uzrum, and you can see weakening my hold on the Ukraine. It doesn't seem to be doing me much good. If I could have taken this space, and I thought about trying, but it would have been harder, that would kind of tighten up my line a little bit by getting Galicia up here. But I just couldn't get the numbers without doing the attack from the Ukraine, and it was too iffy to try. So I did not do that. Well, it would certainly be advantageous, especially if I could get Prussia afterwards. And what else? I guess that's about it. I believe the Serbians can go into Greece unless the Germans attack it or the Austrians attack it. And if they do attack it, They'll get to wedge their way in a little bit, and then the Serbs could go there. Since the Allies can't trace supply through Albania, even if I upgrade this unit and attack into Bosnia, I'll then be left alone here, unable to march into Vienna. So that's not going to be easy as a route into Austria. So I don't really have to worry about defending that particularly. And we'll move on. Turn, they took a card that they don't have to play for themselves. They played it for Austria-Hungary. It's this elite mountain division over here. That unit negates the mountain defensive advantage. It's eliminated when the unit's eliminated, not before that. So that'll give me a shot in getting into Greece. There's more mountains in the Austrian territory, so I want it on an Austrian unit, either Austria or Italy or the surrounding areas, so it's more valuable there. It does not serve much purpose for the Germans, although it was actually a German unit, I believe. And we saw some of the attritional effects. First of all, the Germans went into Prussia, and they succeeded in taking it with a heavy push. But beyond that, they also launched additional attacks against the Russians and into the Somme, and they almost took the Somme, actually, attacking from both places. The reason they can do all this, they have tons of points to spend. They have that 12 production, especially now that it's back with Prussia, and there's really no reason for them not to try to attrition the enemy. I like the way this system handles that. Unlike some of the other systems that use sort of this attritional, where you just get to keep pushing the enemy beyond what you can replace very easily. Attacks here are very unlikely to create. There's seldom a dream that you're going to be able to punch through. Now, in the Somme, there was some chance that it could happen, and that made it more attractive. But the main attractive faction is that I'm degrading the enemy. But I have a limit to how much my armies can go, and they stop at that limit. And that limit's approximately, at least after I took a couple voluntary losses, which maybe I shouldn't have been allowed to take, that limits I'm pretty sure I shouldn't have been. That limits approximately the amount, because I think the Germans defended Belgium also with a none shall pass. That limits approximately the size of my army, which is to say that I can smash my army every season and rebuild it, as long as I don't have anything else I want to do, like give Austria a buck, which maybe I do right now. And that may be why I didn't make an attack there. But there's also the danger that maybe I need to rebuild my subs. Haven't done those rolls yet. Brits were very effective against the Brits this turn. They took 2 hits. The beginning of the turn was the Treaty of London that brought Italy in the game. Now, Italy starts off with 2 damaged armies here. I moved them into Venetia because I'm pretty well defended over here, and there wasn't much else I wanted to do. I did attacks over in East Africa, and I actually attacked into Jerusalem. That failed. Paid to build up a bunch of the units. The French armies rebuilt. And I wanted to give a buck to France and a buck to Italy, but turns out didn't have enough cash for that because of the U-boats. So instead, it was either that or build a second level of entrenchment in the Somme, and I chose the defense on the Somme over that, because if I'm going to make a punch at Verdun, which I thought about this turn, I want to make sure that's a little more solid, and then I can maybe pull a couple of troops out one way or the other, and leaving Paris undefended for a Verdun attack. That would be a really bad idea, so I don't want to weaken Paris too much. So making the attack from Paris makes sense, I guess. There's complexity to figuring that out, and I don't quite have the feel for it. And we have the technology. The Germans got a poison gas. Counter battery, C1. Western Allies place a heavy artillery in any area containing at least 1 French or British army. Eastern Ally US places 1 in any area containing at least 1 land-supplied Russian army. And now I can roll 2 dice when attacking or defending, and that's cool, because that's a sea level That's a 1-level card. I don't think there's a C2, but it means all my artillery batteries all have a defensive bonus. The reason I'm having trouble with the borders in this game, so Prussia, I thought, connected to Minsk, and the Russians withdrew to both Minsk and Lithuania. They're fine. They just defended Lithuania. This doesn't have any real effect, except now that I was looking, I'm like, oh, the artillery, where do I put it? Minsk? No, that doesn't make sense. So I'm going to put it over here. Where I have a heavy weight of active forces, I might try to push back on Prussia or whatever. There's no trench there. Hey, there's a trench in Poland. Okay, and that will bring us to the Eastern Allies. Might as well draw my event card while I'm online. This can slip up there. And this one's gone. Okay. Lusitania sunk. Flip the USA marker to the Lusitania sunk side. Oops. That might be an issue. If U-boats are in the Hague box, it would be +1. However, they're in the unrestricted. So we're bringing the US closer into the game. I finally choose to use unrestricted warfare. It was effective, but ouch. Russians managed to knock the Austrians out of the Ukraine. They first tried a shot at Galicia. That didn't work very well. So after one attempt to attack into there, they went in to clear the Ukraine. If they could have taken Galicia, they'd cut the Ukraine off, and the Austrians could have moved into Kiev, but then they'd be out of supply and kind of stuck down there and just asking to be killed. So the attack as it was, yeah, it shortens Austria's lines, but it also shortens the Russian lines and makes life a lot easier for us. Very easy to defend the whole of the Ukraine. One problem with area-based stuff, you know, I mean, to some extent you can say, well, it represents the terrain and everything, but you know, this is a lot of space. Two little armies, well, one little army isn't going to defend this as well as it'll defend, say, the Lithuania-Prussia border, you know? It's just not as believable. Yes, the forces were stretched out more here historically, but it's just not, you know, there should be some kind of relationship between the sizes of the areas and the amount of troops needed to defend it effectively. The reason you don't come this way is there's not much here to take, not because one army can hold so much territory very easily. The Eastern powers, they got the addition of Bulgaria to the game. Oh, kind of happening pretty close to timeline. The Bulgarians shift some troops into Serbia. I think Serbia fell a little early. And we made a successful attack into Greece. But that creates some interesting things. First of all, the Salonika is gone. And no longer matters. Because Greece is now in the war as a Western ally. And they're going to hunt their army down. The British army is damaged. I could continue launching attacks, I guess, with that big push there. The trench is gone. If I succeed in knocking the Greeks down, then I could get a lucky shot and defeat Greece overall, and there would be nowhere for them to retreat. I think that's worth trying. That's kind of what the intention was here, although I did have one failure. But yeah, I actually have two armies here still. So maybe I didn't have a failure, did I? Did I fuck up? I blew the trench. That didn't cost me anything. I blew one unit. I don't know if I could have had a failure. Yeah, I don't think I had a failure, no. So, yeah, I could actually knock them out just from Serbia. I definitely want to do that. With the big push gone, it becomes a little iffier. Now I'd be making two iffy attacks. I still want to do it because I'm that kind of person. That was a failure. That's a Bulgarian army that got hurt there. Okay, well, that's time to call it. The Turks didn't do anything exciting whatsoever. I got some builds to do. try to prepare to defend myself against the Italians, for example. Maybe I shouldn't have concentrated on Greece, but if I could have taken Greece out, man, that would have opened up, the Austrian army freed it up for the most part. Sure, the Brits could do an invasion of Greece again, but it didn't look like it was working very well the first time. We push into the winter of 15, we're seeing something that's very much not the historical situation, but very, very plausible. And I have to say, that pleases me more than I think any other World War I game has managed yet. Yeah. But that's operational. In terms of plausible results, I feel like Der Weltkrieg does a pretty good job of that. Now, maybe I'd have to rewatch my videos to see the case there. And honestly, there's other operationals that maybe do the Grand Illusion kind of did something neat, although it's got its points. But I don't feel like I'm playing the whole war out there. With Der Weltkrieg, I am playing the whole Western Front. This whole section. This is all in play for the entirety of the war, which is a pretty big, to me, that shows a lot of the war. I don't know how the strategic situation that works with that design goes. The biggest problem I have with that design has to do with the choice of using actual units. So you have to instead of strength points. So you have to shift your units back and forth all over the place and just try to balance your line out. And it's just this headache type thing that I don't feel like adds to play. Now I know some people are like, well, the game would suck if you made it that generic. I don't think it would, but that's my taste in the matter. I don't feel like the units provide much more than strength points. But anyway, this one, for a strategic World War I, this one's impressing me more than anything else I've seen yet. Now, in terms of managing a historically believable circumstance. Balance of power, I've heard arguments that the kind of attrition that I saw in it, which was you push the enemy. Basically, you have the capacity to trade losses in it. And if you're strong against one enemy, like, the Germans tend to be stronger than the Russians, well, if they push the Russians, maybe they can, the Russians tend to be the weak point in the Entente. So if you push the Russians hard enough, maybe they can break, and then you get your forces for the West. And on the West side, you're saying, well, the Germans aren't attacking us, so we have lots of excess capacity. We can push the Germans as hard as possible and make it harder for them to break Russia. And they kind of do as much as they can there. And a little bit more limited there, I think, would be wise than maybe what I did. But basically what you end up seeing, and you see this in La Grande Guerre, and you see this in World War I by SPI to some extent, you definitely see it in the Great War by Rand. Not so much in Paths of Glory, because the card-driven creates its different kind of cycle. But what you basically see is the armies just get wrecked beyond comprehension. You're seeing losses that cannot be recovered. This game, because attacking's so kind of shitty, and because you're not going to gain, you're just attritioning, it's much, much more questionable, and you're not sure that you're going to hurt the enemy. In these other games, you're almost certain that you're going to do some damage to the enemy. Here, it's no certitude. And so you're kind of like, okay, I'll take attrition combat up to what I can replace and no more than that. I will not push my army to the breaking point the way that you do in the other games. And the other games, you push it beyond the breaking point because you're hurting the other player where he's not chosen to fight. And I don't feel like that kind of dynamics here. And it sort of cuts the problem completely out. Now, maybe I misplay both those games. Maybe Balance of Power and La Grande Guerre and all these others, maybe there's better ways to play them. I've played them opposed, not Balance of Power. But I played most of those games opposed at one time or another in my life. And what I found was the strategy that I use and that seems clear to me, is a dominating strategy and can only be opposed by its own same kind of play, which is ultimate bloodthirstiness. Through this U-Boats Unleashed card, this would give them a U-boat rebuild, which they didn't need, but they're going to get a bonus technology. We'll get to that in a bit. They used their poison gas and launched a major assault on Lithuania, but it did not work. And then they tried some attrition attack over here. That didn't do them any good. And then they tried over here in the Somme. That didn't do any good. They got a few points left. They could afford some more. Ooh, they got their attack against the Brits here. And they're just doing guerrilla warfare, which works again. It's just a matter of trying to reduce Britain's money, make this not generate cash for them fairly often by killing that unit. And if that unit attacks back, it makes life difficult on itself too. Okay. So it kind of helps the job. I could have sent forces down into Austria to help guard them against the Italians. However, I feel fairly safe in the mountains here, I guess. This is going to give me enough money that I can entrench in Prussia and maybe send some bucks to Austria to help them, because they're kind of in trouble right now. Anyway, poison gas is going to go back. U-Boats Unleashed hasn't been resolved. I think all I have to do is my builds now, and then my technology draws, which I'll try to remember to do so that I get to see the cards, the mechanism for the 2-card draw. It only works on U-boats. I was wrong when I initially said, hey, it looks like you draw 2 eligible cards. There's eligibility requirements on the card themselves, like the Fokker Scourge only works on airplanes. Normally the bonus technology happens first, so we'll take a look at that. And this is what's special here. I get actually 2 U-boat cards, but only one of them is valid. So I'm going to put this with the poison gas. It'll get reshuffled. And we get this one, card effects listed on U-boat attack tables. This is commerce rating. I'll put this up here so I remember it. I don't think there's a counter for that. And then I get my normal technology draw, which is A2 planned barrages. I don't have an A1, so that gets shuffled back in as well. Is that the Western Allies event? Increased U.S. production or entry marker, and yeah, they're coming in, and the Brits are going to get an extra production point for this turn. That'll help. We did a huge attack on Verdun coming out of Paris and succeeded. Remember, the Germans can't do the thou shalt not pass, so they got shoved by, and things are looking worse. The French are going to get their full production again. The Brits have a bonus. I don't think I want to do anything else, and that includes making an attack with Italy. With 2 full-strength Austrian armies in Austria, it's just not worth it. I'll build another Italian army. Assuming there are any more. Maybe there aren't. There aren't many places that I can send money from Italy. Oh, yeah, Italy does have some additional armies. Good. They should. Yeah, so we'll begin to build up some reserves in order to punch through a little harder. And I don't know, after I get the production, I'll pull the tech card and see what happens. Well, the subs did 2 hits to us, which means we netted out at -1 for the Brits. But we still were able to build some entrenchments here, as well as pretty much all the French and most of the British all over the place are in good shape, including Greece here. So we're in pretty solid there. Let's draw a tech card and see what comes of that. That's P3 Royal Air Force. We're not getting that. And that'll push us to the Eastern Allies. Tech card, the event card for that. I have to say the amount of reshuffling, especially with the tech cards, is fucking annoying. I kind of like the Chitbill system in Le Grand Guerre better in terms of the draws, but of course there's an advantage. These cards can contain a great deal of information on them. It's just so many reshuffles is a little bit painful. Might be able to do a combination of cards with chits. I don't know. But anyway, I mean, it's not that huge a thing, but every turn you basically have to reshuffle the tech decks most turns. And then, of course, every year you have to reshuffle the event decks, and they get very small in between. But let's see what our event card is. Entente pressures Serbia, DRM +2. First attack this turn by a Serbian army against an Austro-Hungarian army. Well, I don't think that's going to have any bloody effect at this point. The Serbs are spent and cannot make an attack. Ended up being a pretty weak player turn. The Russians basically passed. They had to recover from the German attacks, and they built themselves some trenches at Lithuania, and the Serbs pulled into Greece. Nothing else, really. No attacks. Just chilling out. I don't feel like in some of the games, Passive Glory, La Grande Guerre, Balance of Power, have some requirement to make an offensive, and that's linked to the national will rules. In this, kind of like some of the other games without a serious national will element, and that includes the SPI game, the RAND game, you don't have that, or you might have some kind of hard fixed, you must attack, once per year on this front or something like that, just because it's not really a thing that you want to do necessarily. Well, the lack of that rule doesn't really make much difference. The only thing that I could see is if a front completely went stale. I don't know how that would happen, but there's always a desire to smack around the guy who's not involved. The thing is that, especially in La Grande Guerre, but also Balance of Power, there's consequences to failed offensives, and that you kind of have to do them, and there's a national will sequence to it, and that all makes sense if you're going into that detail. But without going into that detail, this seems to generate the kinds of offensives that you want, just because you got to wear out your troops, because otherwise you're wasting your rebuilds. Russia doesn't have to, but they're suffering a grand offensive essentially from the Germans. So in La Grande Guerre terms, and I think Balance of Power as well, they're exempted. Why I didn't draw the event card while I was chattering, I don't know. Shackled to a corpse. Place in Vienna. DRM -1. All attacking Austrian-Hungarian units for the remainder of the game. This will be cancelled if Germany spends 1 PP or a German unit is in the attacking area. So again, a card that is not absolutely clear. It says modifier cancelled if Germany spends 1 PP or a German unit is in the attacking area. The way that's worded, my assumption is it's a one-time. You can remove it once by Germany spending 1 PP. I don't know where Germany gets PPs from during the combat phase. They don't have any. I guess they declare they spend one or something. I don't know. There's no playbook with this game to explain that. Maybe it's in that extended sequence, extended example of play. But trying to hunt for rules clarifications and shit like that, it's just ridiculous. I mean, it's like, trying to see if War and Peace tells you when Davu's birthday is. It might, but good luck. How are you going to find it? Sure, if you have an electronic version, maybe you could find that this particular card is mentioned in there. But as it is, I'm going to just try to interpret it as best as I can, which I feel like much of this game has that issue with. I'm calling it out when it really hits me, but there's been times I've noticed it where I haven't called it out as well. It's like particularly problematic because Germany does not have PPs to spend when the Austrians are going. At all. They just don't have them. They get them during technology, or during their production, they lose them in between. If they don't spend them at that point, maybe I can use this. I just really don't know, maybe this is in that errata fac. I'll go look. But I gotta tell you, having to run down and check on the computer to see if the game makes any sense at any given time is a pain in the butt. This is a bad one. Here's what the designer says about this, and it's totally not, understandable from the card. During the German turn, they can spend a PP, send it to Austria, to the shackled to a corpse counter only. And then that counts for the entire turn, not just for one attack. I would never have guessed that. I would have guessed that the Germans would pay $1 each time they wanted to cancel the modifier on a single die roll, honestly, unless there's a German unit in the space. Wow. Not much came of all that. The Austrians sent the mountain division up here to attack the Italians. I don't know why. Greece just looked more questionable for some reason, but because the Brits are directly supporting it, whatever the Italians I can put pressure on. I got the mountain unit. I had a couple of units there, moving that and the artillery there. I still leaves these guys somewhat defended. However, Bulgaria is at risk, and I didn't gain anything from it, obviously. Now, I was able to rebuild the Austrian army. I mean, it would have been possible, but... And the Turks did a little attack on Baghdad, because that's more expensive for the Brits to recuperate than anything else. Maybe an attack against the Russians would have made more sense, because that's where my focus is, but the Russians were more likely to successfully defend. I'd rather take a couple bucks from the Brits, if possible. And I think that ends 1915 for us. Yep, no technology check or anything. I gotta rebuild the decks for the spring and load this sucker up.